Imagine waking up before the sun, every single day, without exception, while the villages around the Sea of Galilee are still submerged in the dense, heavy silence of the dawn. The stars are still flickering like dying embers over the dark water, and the cold morning air cuts through your linen clothes. Jesus rises slowly from the place where they had slept, leaving without making a sound, walking alone to an isolated hill or the misty shoreline to pray. This wasn't an exception. It was the absolute rule. It was within this invisible discipline, this quiet ritual happening before any disciple opened their eyes, that everything began. It was as if the day could only make sense after that moment in the dark between him and the silence. But who were these men waking up on the hard ground to follow him? None of the 12 completely understood the profound weight of this daily habit at first. They had violently disrupted their own lives. They had abandoned their heavy fishing nets, walked away from lucrative tax collection tables, and left their secure family businesses behind to follow a man who spoke unlike any traditional rabbi they had ever known. The reality of walking with him was completely different from what they had imagined. There was no fixed temple for them. There was no reserved synagogue, no formal school equipped with stone benches and carefully organized parchment scrolls ordered by difficulty. Instead, what they found was the relentless road, the biting dust, the unpredictable wind, and him constantly walking ahead. The Galilee of the year 30 AD was a rugged territory marked by violent contrasts and a raw beauty that no one with open eyes could ignore. You could smell the sharp scent of smoked fish and salt in the morning markets of Capernaum, mixed with the chaotic noise of boats being dragged onto the sand. You could hear the guttural shouts of tired fishermen negotiating the price of a sleepless night of labor, while seagulls fiercely fought over the scraps. They were stepping into an unpredictable journey, leaving the only world they knew behind. Imagine the suffocating weight of the first night away from home, lying on a thin mat in a strange village, listening to the unfamiliar rhythm of the wind. For Peter, Andrew, James, and John, the sound of the lake was their heartbeat, but now, that rhythm was replaced by the silence of the dusty road. Have you ever wondered about the internal storm that must have raged within these men during the first weeks of their journey? They hadn't just left their nets. They had left their social standing, their financial security, and the expectations of their families. In the small, tight-knit communities of Galilee, walking away from a family business wasn't just a career change. It was often viewed as a betrayal of one's heritage and a radical break from the ancestral covenant. The conflict wasn't just internal. It was written into the very soil they trod upon. As they walked through the fertile plains of Gennesaret, they weren't just travelers. They were subjects of a complex and dangerous political machine. The presence of Roman soldiers, the metallic clink of their armor and the sharp, rhythmic strike of their hobnailed sandals against the basalt stones was a constant reminder of the occupied world they lived in. Herod Antipas's agents were everywhere, their eyes searching for any sign of rebellion or taxable wealth. Every step Jesus took towards a village was a calculated risk that his followers felt in their very bones, a physical tension that never truly dissipated. Walking with Jesus meant living in a state of perpetual psychological tension. On one side, the religious elite viewed this Galilean rabbi with growing suspicion, their whispered criticisms like dry leaves in the wind. On the other, the desperate crowds pressed in, smelling of poverty, sickness, and unwashed wool, begging for a touch, a word, or a miracle. The disciples were caught in the middle, acting as human barriers, their muscles aching from the physical strain of managing the masses. They were exhausted, often thirsty, and perpetually confused by Jesus' parables, which seemed to dismantle their traditional understanding of the kingdom with every word he spoke. They were no longer the masters of their own destiny. They were students of the unknown, walking a path where the destination remained shrouded in mystery. Imagine sharing your only piece of dry bread with a man who, just months ago, you would have gladly killed. This wasn't a hypothetical scenario for the 12. It was their brutal daily reality around the campfire. We often picture the disciples as a unified choir of holy men, but the historical truth is far more volatile and fascinating. Jesus didn't assemble a peaceful study group. He forged a highly combustible brotherhood. Take Matthew, the tax collector, a man who had sold his soul to the Roman Empire for a percentage of his neighbor's poverty. Now, place him next to Simon the Zealot, a political extremist whose very identity was built on assassinating Roman collaborators exactly like Matthew. Every time they sat down to eat, the tension must have been thick enough to cut with a rusted dagger. In the first-century rabbinic tradition, the ultimate goal of a Talmud, a disciple, wasn't just to know what the rabbi knew, but to become exactly who the rabbi was. There was a famous Jewish proverb that said, "Cover yourself in the dust of your rabbi's feet." But the traditional religious establishment only selected the elite, the boys who had memorized the Torah flawlessly by age 14. The rest were sent back to their family trades. Peter, Andrew, James, and John were the rejects. They were the ones who didn't make the cut. They were common laborers, smelling of raw tilapia and sweat, marked by deeply calloused hands, not ink-stained fingers. When Jesus walked up to them on the shore and said, "Follow me," he was doing something culturally scandalous. He was looking at men the religious system had deemed unworthy and saying, "I believe you can do what I do." This changes everything about how we understand their absolute devotion. They didn't just follow him because of the miracles. They followed him because he was the first rabbi who ever wanted them. This unmerited choosing bound them to him, even when they were starving enough to illegally crush raw wheat in their hands on the Sabbath, just to silence their churning stomachs. Imagine standing at the edge of your own familiar life, looking at an open road that offers absolutely no guarantees. This is the exact precipice where the disciples stood every single morning. We often sanitize their journey, turning their raw, terrifying leap of faith into a comfortable religious metaphor. But what does it actually look like to leave your nets behind in the reality of your own everyday life? Your net might not be made of rough hemp ropes smelling of the Sea of Galilee. Your net might be a career that drains your soul but pays the bills, a toxic relationship you are terrified to leave, or a desperate obsession with the approval of people who don't even truly know you. The psychological cost of walking away from what is safe is staggering. When Jesus asked them to follow him, he wasn't offering a social promotion or financial stability. He was inviting them into a life of profound vulnerability. They had to wake up each day and consciously choose to trust a path they couldn't see, led by a man they were only beginning to understand. In our modern world, we are completely obsessed with control. We demand the 5-year plan, the exact GPS coordinates, and the guaranteed return on our emotional investments. But the harsh, beautiful truth of the first-century road is that genuine faith begins exactly where your illusion of control definitively ends. Have you ever felt that quiet, terrifying pull to step out into the unknown? The disciples didn't possess special theological training to handle that suffocating fear. They just had a singular, desperate focus on the man walking ahead of them. When the violent storms hit the lake, or when the crowds inevitably turned hostile, their survival didn't depend on their own strength, but solely on their proximity to him. Applying their ancient reality to your life today means actively embracing the intense discomfort of not having all the answers. It means recognizing that true, lasting transformation never happens while you are safely anchored to the familiar shore. It demands the daily courage to step into the dust, to feel the scorching heat of the day, and to walk forward even when your mind is screaming at you to turn back. Imagine the moment the sun finally dipped below the rugged horizon on that very first day. The air over the Sea of Galilee grew suddenly cold, and the disciples sat in a tight circle around a small crackling fire. Their hands, still bearing the fresh calluses of pulling heavy linen nets, were now completely empty. The familiar scent of their stone houses was already fading, replaced by the sharp smell of burning acacia wood and the dry, ancient dust of the wilderness. They looked at each other, a despised tax collector, political zealots, and rough fishermen bound together not by a shared past, but by the undeniable gravitational pull of the rabbi sitting quietly among them. They didn't know that their exhausted footsteps were actively writing the most consequential chapters of human history. They only knew that returning to their predictable lives was no longer an option. Leaving everything behind was not a single glorious event. It was an agonizing, beautiful choice they had to make every single morning. It meant trading the absolute security of the known for the terrifying reality of the unknown. And this is the profound historical truth that echoes across 2,000 years directly into your life today. You cannot discover what you are truly called to be while desperately clinging to what you have always been. Following Jesus demands the daily courage to drop the heavy nets that have kept your soul confined to the shallow waters. If this immersive journey into the brutal and beautiful reality of the first century touched you, I want to hear from you. What is the net in your own life? The comfort zone, the hidden fear, or the false security that you know you need to leave behind on the shore? Leave your comment below. Also, if you have any questions or doubts about the daily lives and hidden history of the apostles, write them down so we can explore them together. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications. Every week, we bring the forgotten history of the Bible back to life.